Okay, so I'm going to be going through a bit of the fly unit catch tray analysis. We're going to look at species, scope, and a little bit of data reasoning as well. So I will do my best. It's quite a difficult subject to have as a presentation because we will be looking at a bit of data, and I apologise if it's quite small, but like I say, I'll do my best. Okay, so first of all, catch tray analysis. Why do we need to look at fly unit catch trays or catch boards? Why do we need to look at it? We've got a big wedge here for audits, and that's probably one of the main ones that we're going to look at, and the reason why we need to actually carry out catch tray analysis. Audits, it's an audit requirement on several of the main audit bodies. They're all asking us to do it, and they also ask us to apply certain things to it as well. So apart from audits, we can use it for monitoring. We want to know exactly what's on site. It can help us give the site recommendations. It might be in the contract. We might have it contracted, so we have to do it as part of our legal obligation. Assessment of progress. So perhaps we have been sorting with the site. We have been looking at hygiene with them, proofing, and we can actually assess the progress of the site by assessing how many flies we've got, and hopefully over time we can see a reduction in overall fly counts, which obviously help as an indicator to prove that they are doing what we want them to and helping to clean their site, help it be less attractive to flying insects. And then the last wedge, service and professionalism. So we're really applying our knowledge to the data that we've collected from the site. And it does take a skill to do this, but I mean, everybody's quite capable of doing this, even from experience and looking at the data. We know what we're looking at, and hopefully I can help you to explain it a little bit as well. So what are we going to look at? There is a couple of things that we generally trend for. So rodents, crawling insects. In this particular scenario, we're going to be looking at the flying insect analysis. I have put a chart on here, just this one. I'll show you a bit of I'll show you it again later, but it's just it is not real data, it's pretend data, but it proves a purpose for us, and it's good to use as an example today. Okay, so what are we looking at when we're trying to analyse the flies? I would recommend that you split it up into several different categories, and I'll explain why for each one. So flying insects, got our blowfly first. Generally, blowflies are coming from outside, and depends on what the site does. Depends on the processes they have, depends on the products they produce. Obviously, meat is a really good attractant, carrion, carcasses, all really good to attract blowflies. And because they are an outside species, tending to be attractive inside, can indicate door control as well. So we can look at that from a proofing point of view, and they can be a key indicator for poor proofing or poor door control. Again, on blowflies, they are one of the larger fly species, and they can have a flying range of up to 3 miles. So we've got a huge flying range on those larger flies. Houseflies, again, could be outside, could be inside, and again, an indicator of hygiene, and can be indicative of the products that are produced on site, whether they get more or less houseflies. And also, more importantly with houseflies, what is around the site. So what is neighbouring onto the site. It may even be a domestic premises. They've got a waste cycling site nearby, and they're actually being attracted to that. Or they've got a farm nearby, a chicken housing or something like that, that we know is prime target for housefly activity. Drain flies, not going to be outside, but are key indicators of drain hygiene. So inside, obviously it's going to be a hygiene issue with the drains, free-flowing drains, blocked drains, any stagnating water could indicate that they've got a sort of an issue with the drains inherently, and then that's why we're seeing a drain fly issue. Fruit flies, again, they're not going to be outside, they are definitely going to be an inside hygiene issue, but again, not forgetting drains, because we can get quite significant fruit fly activity from the drains. But in general, anything that's fermenting, again, process. What are they doing on site? What debris have they got? What have they got that's a waste product or anything that's fermenting? SPI are also on here, so stored product insects. And it's interesting to look in fly units or on boards or fly catch boards for stored product insects, because again, it's an early indicator that the site might have a bigger issue. They might have had a product brought onto site that's fully infested, and we've picked it up from the fly unit. or they might have an issue with their hygiene or their process and their products that they're producing. So again, it's a key indicator that there's a deeper problem on site or actually there, and we're picking it up in the fly unit. I've got other on there as well. So this is basically anything else that you want to include. I would always have in the other category things like wasps or more specific indicators, if you like. So in that other category, you might pick up cluster flies or yellow swarming flies. And it would also be worth noting down because if we get lots of wasps in summer, for example, that's not unusual. We get that, and that can contribute to the seasonal trend that we should always see. However, something like a cluster fly, we know that there's another issue on site and something that might need extra treatment to prevent it becoming a full issue. So here's our sort of first data sheet, if you like. This is just a really basic outline of a site. It's quite a small site. I've got 12 fly units. And then I've counted for each of the categories on here. And you'll also see I've put a total count as well. So we don't always have total counts. And I know that a lot of companies don't do a total count. But overall and year on year, when you see a total count, you can actually sort of give praise to the site, particularly if it's come down. And you can say, yeah, you've clearly sorted some of your hygiene issues, you're clearly carrying out a better, more efficient, less attractive to flies process, which I think, if anything, that you can praise a site for, praise a company for, it's doing something good. And I think that helps with the professionalism, helps with the communication, and helps with your relationship with the site as well. So I think if you can praise them, I think you should, especially with something like a fly count, because it is something that's really looked at very carefully. So I'll do a little bit on tolerance as well, and this is another audit requirement. So the problem arises with tolerance when we as pest controllers are treated in the same way and treated with the same data analysis as something like bacteria. So our fly counts are treated in that same way. It's really easy to apply tolerance and acceptable limits to bacterial counts, and from that respect, the hygiene. And it's actually quite difficult to apply that same technique and same idea to fly counts. So this is one of the sort of simplest ways that we can do it. We can just add simple low, medium, high percentages on. So from your baseline, take an average count for that unit, and then we can add on 15% for a low count, or a low tolerance, medium tolerance 10%, and then a high tolerance of 5%. And that would relate to the risk of the unit as well. So I have put some colours on here. Got yellow is low, medium is the orange colour, and then red is obviously the high risk areas. And in this particular example, we've got main production as a high risk area. And we've also got kitchen and canteen, and that'll feed into what I'll do in a minute. But as far as tolerance counts, I have got it on a chart as well, so you can see it applied to the chart using it a different way. It can get quite complicated. So if you're applying a single count and a single tolerance to the unit, dependent on where it is, you would need to look at each and every unit in its individual right for every single count, and that can get complicated. So I'll show you on a chart, which might be an easier way to look at it. So tolerance bars on here, you can see them. We've got the red, orange, and the yellow. And immediately I can see from this, we've set the tolerance bars at an average base rate, and then we've added on 10%, 15%. So from this, we can see at the bottom here, we've got a unit here. This is the main production unit, unit 6. From the previous chart, we know it's a high risk unit, and we are well below the high risk bar. So hopefully that makes sense. So here's the high risk tolerance bar. This unit is very well below it. And then we might come to look at the other 2 units that we've classed as high risk. So we've got a kitchen and the canteen area. And we've got some clear breaches. And from the key, we've got a fruit fly breach. And we've also got a blowfly breach as well in that canteen. So these ones here, we've got a blowfly breach, it's breaching that red line, and then we've also got some fruit fly breaches too. So immediately from that, we know in those areas, canteen, kitchen, we know just from that count that we need to be looking at the door control, the blowflies, they're going to be coming in from somewhere outside, or we may have an inherent rodent issue. So there may be a carcass of a rodent somewhere if they have had rodent issues that's supporting that blowfly problem. And that's what we're seeing in those fly units, particularly in that area. It's a general area. You wouldn't expect to see too many blowflies unless there is some serious amiss, such as a rodent issue underlying, or they've got really, really poor door control and the blowflies are coming in. As for the fruit fly breaches, it's a clear issue with hygiene, 100% hygiene. They might have a product that's fermenting somewhere, they might have drain issues, and from counting for those particular categories, I'm not saying it's set in stone, you can choose what to count for, but just as a guideline, you can kind of see how we're counting for specific flies, specific species, and that those are chosen key indicators for certain things. So even without knowing the site, without seeing the site, I can look at that data and say they need to clean their kitchen. Okay. When would we carry out a count? So I've got a couple of options on there: annually, biannually, quarterly, and then obviously dependent on audit standards. And that's quite a big one actually. Most of the audit standards now say annual, so a minimum annual trend analysis needs to be carried out. And as for the counts, well, I think quarterly is okay, unless you've got one of the certain audit standards such as AIB, so American Institute of Bakers, and they actually have it in their specification to check the units, check the catch trays or rewards on a more frequent basis at peak season. So if we're counting in summer, they would expect them to be counted every week or sort of bi-weekly. And that sounds very extreme. However, when you look at the origins of the AIB audit, it does originate in much warmer climates. And yeah, in summer, they do have fly units overflowing with flies that do need emptying every single week. So when we take that in consideration, if you are having to do an AIB site, you might want to have it in your documentation somewhere saying that due to previous counts, due to total count, the units are not necessarily need to be serviced each week in summer due to lower fly count. So you'd need that in the documentation somewhere to say that you looked at it, you appreciate it, but it's just something that's not necessary. Okay. So we'll look at some quarterly counts of our data. I'm going to look at the charts. So our first chart here, so service one, so sort of around the first quarter, really low counts all around. We know that we've not got really any significant issues there. And then our second service, you will notice that I've got the same parameters on my charts. When you are doing fly counts, have the same parameters so you can make direct comparisons. Okay, so we're moving on in the year a little bit. The counts are starting to rise, particularly sort of our warmer sort of breeding species. There's fruit fly, drain fly, they're starting to come up. A few others as well, so we're starting to see some blowfly and housefly, as you'd expect. Sort of most expected higher counts from the third service of the year, so we're moving into the third quarter. Again, quite significantly higher than some of the others, and we can see some certain species counting high in certain areas. Again, sort of locker room there, immediately I know that there's been a fruit fly issue in that area due to sort of higher elevated numbers. Somebody might have had something in underneath the lockers. They might not have been cleaned. They've left something in that area for too long. And then our sort of final count of the year, hopefully the fly units counts have come significantly down, and that's something that we'd like to see. So far we have seen a pretty perfect seasonal trend, but I will point out one thing on this data here. So on this one, we've got a noticeable peak. So we've got a noticeable peak for drain fly, and in the area that we're looking at, the 2 units in the warehouse, it's not a high risk area. We're going to have most likely fully packed product. However, it might be a contamination issue with stock going out of the warehouse. So you might want to have a look at that. But immediately I know that we perhaps need to go and have a look at that area, check the drains, check that they've been flushed, check they're clean, check they're free running, and check that we don't have any ongoing issues in that area. So you can see how even peaks like this can really kind of trigger a count and trigger you to go and have a quick look in that area, or as you go around on your routine, you can check in those areas really carefully. Okay. This is another one. So this is the total fly counts per month and per unit. So we've got all the units mapped on here, and it's just a different way to show a sort of an annual trend. And again, we can see we've got an absolute perfect trend. And this is really good to see. We've got a perfect seasonal, really good, but it can hide some certain things. But from an overall count, it's really good to see this. And I think overall, especially when we consider the sort of smoothed out trend, if you like, per service, per site, we've got a perfect seasonal trend. But what we need to look at when we're actually analysing the data is to actually drill down into some of those points, like we have done already, such as some of the peaks that you might pick out. Okay, so in our sort of trend analysis documentation, we need to fully appraise the data. So obviously we need an overall view of it, and we need to also be concise. So I think from doing auditing, you get kind of it can get a bit tedious reading through pages and pages and pages of trend analysis. It's just not necessary. It can be really concise, and a paragraph is plenty for each. Even if you were to do a paragraph for each service, or a paragraph just saying no trend found. If there isn't any trends, if there isn't any noticeable peaks, say that. It's much better to have that down on paper as traceability, say no trends found, no peaks noted, no issues. And then if there is a peak, if there is even just like one spike, note it down. And perhaps if it is high enough and does go above tolerance, then investigate it and do a report for that, and corrective action if that's sort of something that you need to have in place. And also, if you are going to have a corrective action in place as part of the audit requirement, it may actually not come to anything. It sounds ridiculous, but when we're actually counting these flies and you go to the area, you investigate, you're looking in drains, looking at whatever the sort of trigger species was, and you don't find anything, that's when we need to put in the investigation report. This could have been due to a hygiene issue that was previously present. So when we are doing the quarterly count, you can see maybe we're counting the flies in June, and that fly peak, that particular hygiene issue that caused it, could have happened way before, like a sort of maximum of 3 months before, if it happened literally just after the previous count had been carried out. So you can be chasing your tail a little bit, and that's something you'd need to feed into this analysis to say that, say it may be due to a previous hygiene issue that's no longer present. And one peak, one spike does not make a trend. So we need to say that if there's no trend on it, it's a single spike, we've investigated it, we haven't found anything, it's just previous. And this is another point. So we can use previous data to benchmark. We can count over years and years and years if you've got enough data. However, it's not normally necessary. I think my advice would probably be to go back a few years. Don't go back too far. Again, you can get wading through all this unnecessary data. In that time, in that past couple of years, there might have been significant changes to site. There might have been significant changes to the products they're producing. There might have been any other major changes. We have also got climatic changes as well between seasons. So I wouldn't go too far back because you do get into too much data. Like I said, if there's random spikes, if there's random things that you note, put them down, try and explain them, try and appraise them. And finally, explain any trends if you can. If that does mean an investigation on site, then fine. And hopefully you can give the site a corrective action and it won't become an ongoing trend. Has just been a brief trend. Okay, thank you. I hope that's been interesting and hopefully what you wanted.
Fabulous, thank you, Avril. That was great. Got a couple of questions that have popped in, so that's good. I was having a look and thinking, oh, we haven't got much there, but Sarah's kindly reminding everybody, and we've got 2 that have come in. So Simon asked then, are templates readily available for catch analysis? And if so, can you point us to them? Also, with fly identification, what advice can you offer so that PCOs can identify the flies correctly?
Okay, I think the first question is, did you say a range?
So templates, in terms of templates, is there one available? That was the first bit of the question.
Oh, in general, no, but I do have a template document that you might want to have a look at and use as you see fit. So if people do want a template, I can help them out with that. So obviously I have a template that I use to do my fly counts with, and it's one that I've made. So if they want a copy, they can have it. It's just on Excel, and it does sort of self-generate graphs. It does what it's supposed to do. So
great.
Yeah,
payable to Avril Turner. Yeah.
If you want a copy, just get in touch and we can send one to you. That's fine.
Great. Yeah, the other bit of the question was with fly identification. Sorry, my voice is going. What advice can you offer PCOs, in terms of identifying them correctly?
Okay. I think there's quite a few good keys out there. I mean, I see them in sort of the pest control folders, and also I know there's a lot on the BPCA website as well for different species. You've got a whole species library, so you can actually look up what you think it is. I think when you are counting for fly sort of in catch trays and on boards, go off the size of them. So the larger flies, if hopefully you can look up the larger flies, they're going to be house flies, they're going to be blowflies, and then your smaller flies, so your small flying species are going to be your drain flies, your fruit flies, and anything else that's unusual. Get it sent off, get it ID'd, and then you can get a kind of even more view of a professionalism on site, because they can see that you want to get it correct for them. So I think there's lots of things you can look at. There's loads of resources out there. We've even got stuff on our website as well, so in the photo library as well.
Fantastic, that's great. How long does the ID sort of normally take on your end?
Okay, at the moment we work on around 10 to 14 days. That's the turnaround. But I know the mail's been a bit slow at the moment, hasn't it? So I think it has been taking a bit longer with Royal Mail being a bit slower. But yeah, we work on around 10 to 14 days.
Mm-hmm. Good stuff. Similar, more of a comment as well as maybe a question in there somewhere from George. So we strongly recommend that midges and mosquitoes are put in as a separate category. Numbers can be astonishingly high. I'm guessing he's experienced that. And important to be able to ID these properly, so not counted as an internal source fly and obviously use the data.
Yeah. I think if you have that on a site, you get certain sites that do have specific mosquito issues, and then some sites will have none ever. So I think it does depend on the site. So I mean, what I've done is like a more that's general. What maybe you'd start off with. Say you're starting on a new site and you're just looking at the fly units for the first time, and once you know, kind of, you get an idea of what species they're getting on that particular site, and you can actually sort of tailor it to the site themselves. I mean, I've had sites that have had significant mosquito issues, and that's basically all we counted for was mosquitoes. And you'd barely ever you might get some drain flies occasionally, but it was mainly just mosquitoes that we count for anyway. And it was just the sort of progression of treatment of those and sorting that out as a sort of symptomatic, if you like, and treating it symptomatically. And I think, if you do want to tailor it to the site, perfect. Just shows that you're showing even more diligence to them.
That's it, site specific. Yeah, I used to deal with the mosquitoes on the coastlands where there's lots of marshland around, and you also that standing water, and that was a real issue. Whereas most places, you wouldn't necessarily.
Yeah, and it all depends what's around the site as well. So not just neighbouring premises, but neighbouring like environment. Is there a large body of water nearby? Is there a huge lake? Is there streams? Is there all other sorts of environmental impacts that might actually force numbers up of certain species?
There's got to be a reason why they're there. Any fly at all, isn't there? So
as the other question on tolerance, should we tolerate any flies at all on site?
I know. Yeah, it's one of those questions, isn't it? Gathering. I get that a few times. Oh, how many are? It is tolerable.
I know. It's like it's like a high care area. Surely no flies. We should have no flies at all. Mm-hmm. And then even if you do have a fly unit in your high care area and it's not picked up any flies for 10 years, do you even need that unit there? Mm-hmm. Probably not.
Yeah, bigger picture stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Great, fabulous. That's all the questions I've all done. Brilliant. Yeah, that was great. Is there anything you wanted to add before we send you on your way?
No, that's fine.
Fabulous. Great. Thank you so much, Avril.
Okay.